Christmas dinner was supposed to feel warm, but that night the air froze mid-breath. Grandpa lifted his glass, smiling down the long table. "So," he began lightly, "how do you like the house I bought you?" Every fork halted. The clinking stopped. I blinked, unsure I'd heard him right. "What house?" For a moment, the room went utterly still. Then Mom's fingers slipped from her wine glass, the color draining from her face. Grandpa's grin faded as his eyes hardened. He pushed his chair back, the scraping sound slicing through the tension. "Show me the deed." "Right now." That was the instant everything splintered apart. But what none of them knew, not even Grandpa, was that this entire dinner had been orchestrated long before anyone sat down. 2 weeks earlier, I hadn't been thinking about property deeds or surprise gifts. My thoughts were on unpaid rent, overdue utility bills, and whether eating instant noodles 3 nights in a row still counted as dinner. My tiny Portland apartment rattled every time the heater kicked in, louder than my own thoughts. It wasn't much, but it was mine, or at least the only thing I managed to pay for myself. Every December, my parents liked to remind me that independence builds character. They said that right after posting photos from their ski vacations and new car deliveries. Mom's texts always started with fake sweetness and ended with a jab. "You really should learn how to manage money like adults do." I never replied. Silence was the only peace treaty that worked in our family. The one person who never made me feel small was my grandfather, Edward Brooks. He was everything my parents pretended to be: disciplined, fair, quietly commanding. When I turned 22, he once told me, one day, "I'll make sure you have a place of your own." I assumed he meant emotionally, not literally. Grandpa believed in planning, not surprises. That's why his call a week before Christmas felt unusual. His voice carried something I couldn't name. "This year," he said, "I have a special present for you." I laughed. "Grandpa, you don't have to buy me anything," he chuckled softly. "Oh, it's already taken care of." I didn't think much about it again, at least not until that night, scrolling through social media. My parents had posted photos from their dinner party in Napa, red wine, staged smiles, captions that read, "Family is everything." It felt like an inside joke I hadn't been invited to. At the cafe the next day, I told my friend Clara about Grandpa's call. We sat at our usual spot, pretending to work behind our laptops. "Special gift, huh?" she teased. "Maybe he finally realized you deserve more than their leftovers." I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. Or maybe it's another lecture wrapped in shiny paper. Outside, rain slicked the windows, Christmas lights blinking faintly against the gray. My coffee had long gone cold. I had no idea then that the gift Grandpa mentioned wasn't something wrapped under a tree. It was a secret waiting to tear open everything I thought I knew about my family. A few days later, while searching my laptop for a client invoice, a new email appeared. The subject line read, "Congratulations on the successful sale of the Pacific Lane property." At first, I dismissed it as spam until the address caught my attention. Pacific Lane. My heart skipped painfully. That was the same street Grandpa once said would suit me, the one filled with sunlight and quiet porches. I opened the message again, my throat tightening. Sold. But sold to who? I called Mom, forcing my voice to stay light. "Hey, random question. Did Grandpa ever buy a house on Pacific Lane?" The pause that followed was too long. Her tone when it came was artificially calm. "Oh, that. No, the market crashed that year, remember? Nothing ever came of it." "Right," I said slowly. "Because I just got this strange email about a sale." Her breath caught audibly. "Angelina, you shouldn't open things that aren't yours. You always overthink." And with that, she hung up. I sat there, phone still buzzing in my hand, trying to understand what had just happened. For the first time, her usual composure sounded a lot like fear. That night, sleep wouldn't come. Every creak of the floorboards, every groan from the pipes sounded like a whisper in the dark repeating, "They lied." I couldn't let it go. I traced the mysterious email to its source, an agency based in Lake Oswego. The next morning, I called them, pretending to be a potential buyer interested in recent property sales. My heart pounded as the realtor on the other end checked their records. "Yes," she confirmed. "The house on Pacific Lane sold 3 years ago. The listed seller was Thomas Brooks." For a moment, I couldn't feel my hands. Thomas Brooks, my father. My mother must have known. They'd sold it, and never said a word. Later that evening, Grandpa phoned to confirm plans for Christmas dinner. I almost told him everything right then, but my throat closed up. I couldn't bear to be the one to break his heart, so instead, I forced a smile into my voice. Of course, I'll be there. I'll bring dessert. After hanging up, I stared out the frosted window. Snow drifted past the glass, city lights bleeding into soft blurs. My phone buzzed. "Clara, you okay?" She texted. I typed back, "I think my parents stole something that was supposed to be mine." Her reply came fast. "Then make them give it back, on their own." I didn't respond. I just closed the laptop, whispered into the stillness. "All right then. Christmas dinner it is." 3 days before Christmas, I drove through freezing rain to Grandpa's office. His longtime assistant, Sarah, greeted me with her usual polite smile, but something uneasy flickered in her eyes. "I just wanted to drop off his gift early," I said, trying to sound casual even as my fingers trembled around the small wrapped box. She hesitated, lowering her voice. "That's kind of you. Mr. Brooks mentioned you'd already moved in." I blinked. "Moved in?" Her brows furrowed, confusion mixing with pity. She looked around, then quietly opened a desk drawer and pulled out a manila folder. "He talks about how proud he is," she murmured. "That you finally have your own place, the one on Pacific Lane." My pulse hammered. "Pacific Lane?" She nodded softly. "He bought it 2 years ago. Said it was in your name. Told us your parents handled the paperwork. He really believes you've been living there all this time." My throat tightened. Can I see something?" After a brief pause, Sarah handed me a photocopy of the property file. My name was printed clearly on the deed, bold, unmistakable. Stapled behind it was another document, a sale agreement bearing my father's signature, Thomas Brooks. Outside, the cold slammed into me like a punishment. I sat in my car, gripping the papers so tightly they wrinkled in my hands. The urge to scream clawed up my chest, but the only sound in the car was the ticking of the turn signal I'd forgotten to switch off. That night, I called Clara. My voice came out flat. They sold it. They took what belonged to me and told him I had it. She was silent for a long moment. Then she asked quietly, "So, what now?" "I'm going to dinner," I said. The next morning, I met with Mark Steele, Grandpa's longtime attorney. I didn't tell him everything, just enough to make a shadow cross his face. "You'll be there, right?" I asked. He studied me carefully. "Do you want me to protect your grandfather or expose your parents?" "Both," I said. In that order. When I left his office, the rain had turned to soft snow. Portland looked peaceful. White streets, glowing lights, everything appearing clean and new. But I knew better. At home, I slid the documents back into the folder and tucked it into my bag. My reflection in the window looked calm, collected. Nothing like the storm brewing inside me. "They think they're the only ones with a plan," I murmured. But so am I. Christmas night arrived cloaked in golden light and heavy silence. The Brooks family gathered around a dining table far too long for the number of hearts that still cared to be there. The chandelier shimmered above us, crystal catching the flicker of firelight from the marble hearth. Laughter floated through the room, light, rehearsed, hollow. I sat across from my parents, half listening to their polished conversations about investments and vacations, every word scraping at my nerves. Grandpa sat at the head of the table, the only smile in the room that still felt real. Grandpa had always been the center of our family, the still point everything revolved. Around, solid, unwavering, I couldn't stop wondering what would happen once he discovered that the foundation he'd built us on was made of lies. Lifted his glass, his voice warm. "To family," Mom's lipstick shimmered as she smiled back. "Always." Our eyes met for a second. Behind her polished expression, something flickered. Too intentional, too careful. I bit my tongue to keep from asking what she was hiding. Dinner carried on in its usual way, polite words that filled the room but meant nothing. Everyone spoke. No one truly listened. Grandpa turned to me with a familiar, gentle curiosity. "How's work, Angie? Clients keeping you busy? Business steady?" "It's fine," I said, steadying my tone. "Not quite as profitable as selling someone else's property, though." Mom's fork slipped against her plate with a sharp clang. "Excuse me?" "Nothing," I murmured quickly, though heat was already rising up my neck. Grandpa chuckled softly, trying to ease the tension. "Still sharp as ever, Angie. Then he paused, as if testing the air. By the way, how do you like the house I bought you? For a heartbeat, I thought I'd misheard. The laughter around the table faded. The gentle hum of the chandelier turned to silence. My lips parted, my voice barely audible. What house? The question cracked through the quiet like thunder. Mom's hand slipped from her wineglass. Red liquid splashed across the white tablecloth, a stain blooming like blood on snow. Dad's jaw locked tight. Grandpa looked from one face to another, confusion deepening. What house? I asked again, louder this time. He set his glass down with a sharp click. Disbelief hardened into anger. Show me the deed. Now. Dad spoke first, his tone shaky but defensive. Dad, this isn't the right time. It's exactly the right time, Grandpa interrupted, calm but cutting. I trusted you to manage that property for her. Mom's voice wavered. Edward, please, we only— Lillian, he said, his voice cold, eyes locking onto hers. Don't insult me with another lie. Every sound in the room sharpened. The crackle of the fire, the ticking clock, the pounding of my heart. From the side doorway, Sarah appeared quietly, as if she had been waiting for this moment. She carried a brown envelope and handed it to Grandpa without a word. He didn't even open it before nodding to someone behind her. Mark Steele, his attorney, stepped into the room, briefcase in hand. Mr. Brooks, he greeted evenly. You asked me to review certain transactions earlier this week. I think you'll want to see these. He opened the briefcase and spread several documents across the table. My parents' faces drained of color. Mark pointed to the first page. Here's the original purchase deed. Buyer, Angelina Brooks. Signed and notarized. He flipped to the next sheet. And this one shows a sale 3 months later by Thomas Brooks. Transfer of funds confirmed here. Grandpa's hand trembled as he traced the signatures. His voice cracked. You sold her house? The one I bought for her future? Dad swallowed hard. We were just managing it. She wasn't ready yet. Ready for what? I snapped, anger spilling out. To have something that's mine? To finally stop needing you? Mom reached for me, eyes pleading. Honey, we did it for you. You were struggling, we thought. I jerked my hand back. No, you thought you could hide it. The air in the room grew thick and heavy, the kind that comes before lightning strikes. Grandpa rose slowly from his chair, the legs scraping the floor, a sound that made everyone flinch. His voice was low but firm. From this moment on, he said, you do not speak for her again. No one moved. No one breathed. Mom began to cry, her mascara streaking down her cheeks. Edward, we didn't mean to hurt her. But you did, he said quietly. And you did it while smiling across my table. He reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a small velvet pouch. From it, a silver key slid into his palm. He looked at me, eyes softening. It was always meant to be yours, Angie, he said gently. And it still is. He set the key in front of me. My hands wouldn't move. For a long moment, I couldn't even breathe. That night, sleep refused to find me. Every groan of the old pipes and creak of the floorboards echoed like a whisper through the dark. They lied. The thought gnawed at me until I couldn't take it anymore. I traced the anonymous email back to its source, a real estate agency based in Lake Oswego. The next morning, I called them, disguising my voice as a curious buyer asking about recent sales. My pulse hammered as the realtor shuffled through records on the other end. Yes, she said finally. That property on Pacific Lane was sold 3 years ago. The seller listed was Thomas Brooks. For a moment, the air left my lungs. Thomas Brooks, my father, my mother must have known. They had sold it together, and neither of them had ever told me. That evening, Grandpa called to confirm plans for Christmas dinner. My throat tightened as I almost told him everything, but the words died before reaching my lips. I couldn't shatter his heart with this, so instead I forced warmth into my voice. Of course, Grandpa. I'll bring dessert. When the call ended, I stared out through the frosted glass. Snowflakes drifted past the window, the city lights outside melting into hazy halos. My phone buzzed. It was Clara. You okay? She texted. I typed back. I think my parents took something that was meant for me. Her response came quickly. Then make them give it back, willingly. I didn't reply. I simply closed my laptop and whispered into the quiet, all right then. Christmas dinner it is. 3 days before Christmas, I drove through sleet and icy rain to Grandpa's office. His longtime assistant, Sarah, greeted me with her usual polite smile, though there was something uneasy flickering in her eyes. I just came by to drop off his gift early, I said, trying to sound casual as I held the small wrapped box, my fingers trembling slightly. She hesitated, lowering her voice. That's thoughtful of you. Mr. Brooks mentioned you'd already moved in. My stomach dropped. Moved in? Where? Her brow furrowed, confusion shadowing her expression. She looked around before pulling open a drawer and taking out a manila folder. He talks about how proud he is of you, she said softly. That you finally have your own home, the one on Pacific Lane. My pulse quickened. Pacific Lane? She nodded. He bought it 2 years ago. Said it was in your name. Told us your parents managed the paperwork. He truly believes you've been living there. My throat constricted. Can I see the file? After a hesitant pause, she handed me a photocopy. My name was printed clearly on the deed, bold, official. Behind it was another document, a sale agreement signed by Thomas Brooks. Outside, the cold hit me like punishment. I sat in my car gripping the papers so tightly they crumpled in my hands. I wanted to scream, but the only sound was the ticking of the turn signal I'd forgotten to turn off. That night, I called Clara. My voice was flat, detached. They sold it. They took what was mine and told him I already had it. There was a long silence. Then she asked quietly, "So what are you going to do?" "I'm going to dinner," I said. The next morning, I met with Mark Steele, Grandpa's attorney for decades. I didn't reveal everything, only enough to darken his expression. "You'll be there, right?" I asked. He studied me carefully. "Do you want me to protect your grandfather or expose your parents?" "Both," I answered. In that order. When I stepped outside, the rain had turned into soft snow. Portland looked peaceful, white streets glowing under festive lights. Everything seemed clean and bright. But I knew better. Back home, I tucked the papers into the folder and slid it into my bag. My reflection in the window looked calm and steady. Nothing like the chaos burning inside. "They think they're the only ones with a plan," I whispered. "But I have one too." Christmas night came draped in gold light and uneasy quiet. The Brooks family gathered around a long, polished dining table, too large for the few hearts still willing to sit there. The chandelier glittered above us, its crystals catching firelight from the marble hearth. Laughter floated through the air, careful, rehearsed empty. I sat across from my parents, half listening as they boasted about investments and vacations, every word grating like static in my ears. At the head of the table, Grandpa smiled, the only genuine warmth in the room. My chest tightened with a mix of relief and sorrow. Then Dad abruptly rose, his chair clattering to the floor. "We're your family," he shouted. "You can't cut us out over a misunderstanding." Grandpa's eyes turned cold. "You're right," he said quietly. "You are family, but not mine." The silence that followed was louder than any shouting could have been. Mom's voice trembled. "Angelina, please, tell him we can fix this." I finally lifted my gaze, steady and unflinching. "You can't fix something you sold." Mark calmly gathered the papers and placed them back into the folder. "We'll begin formal proceedings in the morning," he said. Sarah stood quietly behind Grandpa, her expression unreadable, somewhere between pity and satisfaction. Grandpa exhaled slowly. "Merry Christmas," he said, not to them, but to me. He placed a hand on my shoulder, the same steady hand that once guided mine when I learned to draw straight lines as a child. "You always did have an eye for balance," he murmured. Mom buried her face in her hands. Dad turned his back, murmuring words too low to catch. It didn't matter. Whatever excuses they had left dissolved into the silence between us. The metal key felt icy against my palm as I stood there, taking in the room that once felt like home. The Christmas tree lights blinked weakly, casting uneven shadows across the walls. The air smelled of pine, and something colder, heavier. Betrayal. I had always imagined revenge would come blazing, full of anger and fire. But it wasn't like that at all. It felt still. Final. Like the last note of a long, mournful song fading into quiet. When I finally stepped outside, the night air bit at my cheeks. Snow had started falling again, soft flakes drifting lazily onto the porch railing. Through the window behind me, I saw Grandpa standing tall and steady, his frame outlined against the golden glow of the living room. Inside, my parents sat small and defeated, swallowed by their own lies. I whispered into the cold, almost like a prayer. They wanted me to earn my life. I just did, and with that, I walked out into the snow, free, chilled to the bone, and awake for the first time in years. Morning came quietly. No one spoke of what had happened the night before, but its weight hung in the air like fog. By sunrise, my parents' car was gone, 2 curved tracks in the snow marking their quiet retreat. They hadn't even said goodbye. I found Grandpa in the sunroom later, moving slower than usual, the heaviness of disappointment shaping each step. I sat with a cup of coffee gone cold. I gave them too much faith, he said softly. I thought money could keep us honest. I lifted my eyes to him. You believed in them, Grandpa. That's not a mistake. He shook his head gently. You reminded me what honesty really means. Then he reached inside his jacket and pulled out an envelope, sliding it across the table. Inside were fresh legal papers, my name printed clearly across the top. The property title complete this time. I had Mark redo the documents last night, he said quietly. It's official. The house is yours now. Theirs will be handled separately. My throat tightened. Grandpa, I don't even know if I want it anymore. His smile was weary but kind. You don't need to move in right away. Just remember, it'll be waiting for you. Like I will, whenever you need me. Later that week, whispers began to spread through Portland's business circles. Thomas and Lillian Brooks had been discreetly removed from several company boards. Their once spotless reputation now carried a faint crack, small, but enough for people to notice. No one beyond the family ever learned the truth. And I didn't feel victorious. Not even vindicated. Just lighter. Over coffee, I told Clara, I didn't win anything. I just stopped losing myself. She smiled softly. That's what winning actually looks like. When I stepped out of the cafe, the snow had melted into thin streams along the sidewalks, glinting under the morning light. For the first time in years, I walked forward without glancing behind me. A week later, I drove to Pacific Lane. The street was quiet, lined with evergreens dusted in pale snow. The house stood at the end, white walls, wide windows, the porch waiting like an open hand. I stepped out of the car, the air crisp and clean, and held the silver key up toward the light. For the first time, I didn't feel like someone's daughter or someone's failure. I just felt like myself. I turned the key in the lock and whispered, home. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it simply stands its ground. If this story spoke to you, share your thoughts and subscribe for more true stories of family, truth, and quiet strength.